punishing perpetrators. Justice means dismantling the very inequalities that made these individuals so vulnerable in the first place. Ladies and gentlemen, the July movement was a fight against discrimination and inequality. While authoritarian barriers to medical care have been lifted, the process remains painfully slow. Good intentions exist, yet inequality continues to hinder real progress. This is where I think the international organizations, international community can play a vital role. Justice is a long process, one that must center the victims themselves. We have to keep it in mind that the victims' immediate need is survival, physical recovery, and long-term psychosocial support with proper coordination and oversight. Fair treatment for victims and holding perpetrators responsible must go hand in hand. Only by addressing both can we prevent such tragedies from happening again. I will end with the words of one of our injured protesters. When asked what justice meant to him, he replied, "Do something sustainable so that in the future, no man can arbitrarily shoot or demean any innocent poor man." Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Sharmeen. Thank you for sharing these individual stories of tragedy, but also of resilience, and for reminding everyone that justice must be a victim-centered process. Absolutely. Our next speaker is Mr. Mir Mahmudur Rahman. Mr. Rahman is a marine engineer who has lost his younger brother during the July-August protests. He's taken an active engagement to support victims and their families in their search for justice. Please, Mr. Rahman.
Good day, everyone. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak in front of you. It's an honor for me. And I introduce myself as a proud citizen of Bangladesh, a beautiful and peace-loving nation, known to many as the country of Nobel Peace Prize winner, Professor Dr. Muhammad Yunus. So, however, it is also the country where the tragic July-August uprising took place. And the reasons are already before you. I'm marine engineer Mir Mahmudur Rahman Dipto, a member of one of the victim families. My younger brother, Mir Mahfuzur Rahman Mugdho, was shot in the forehead during the uprising. He was unarmed and harmless, helping the injured reach hospitals, distributing water and food, serving humanity, as he always did. But this time, he was shot dead on the spot. This is how humanity dies. His death made headlines worldwide because we refused to stay silent, unlike many who had to. Out of fear, some couldn't even mourn to bury their loved ones. Ordinary people suffered. Rickshaw pullers who acted as ambulances were shot. Peaceful protesters silenced. Bright young talents like 𝗵𝗵𝗃𝗂𝗃𝗃𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 Fatima Sultana, and children like Jabir Ibrahim. So many lives lost, forever missed. Today we stand as one family, united in our demand for justice. Being Bangladesh, a peaceful nation itself, never expected its own citizens to be killed by those meant to protect them. The world must take note. I thank the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights for their commitment to bring the truth in front of the world. This report is not just numbers, it holds the pain, loss, and struggle for justice of real people. I see my own grief and the one of many others reflected in this report. Justice is not a single act, but a process, one that demands prosecution, truth-seeking, reparations, and institutional reforms. For victims, justice means accountability, not just for those who pulled the trigger, but also for those who gave the orders. There has been some progress. The International Crimes Tribunal has begun contacting victims' families, and Home Ministry officials are now holding bi-weekly meetings to update us on investigations. But gaps remain. Many victims still wait for their voices to be heard, while others have lost faith in a system that has failed them repeatedly. These gaps mean continued trauma, social divisions, and the risk of history repeating itself. The international community must do more than issue statements. Decisive action is needed, supporting independent investigations, enforcing consequences for non-compliance, and ensuring justice mechanisms center on survivors. Political interests must never overshadow fundamental human rights. Symbolic gestures are not enough. Governments must strengthen domestic justice systems. International bodies must enforce accountability, and civil society must push for lasting change. From this tragedy, a new slogan has emerged in Bangladesh, that is 𝗔𝗯𝘂𝘁𝗃𝗄𝗃 যুদ্ধ, which means 𝗔𝗯𝘂𝘂𝘁𝗃, the fight isn't finished yet. We don't stop when we are tired, we stop when we are done. We need your help, the world's help, to rebuild, reform, and achieve justice. Will you stand with us? My younger brother believed that no one would fire at students. He told me, we have the history of 1952, 1969. Whenever students were shot, the outcome was tragic. Our country won't make the same mistake again. But the very next day, he was proven wrong as he fell, shot in the head. Accountability is not just about addressing past crimes. It is about shaping a future where such violent acts are never tolerated again. If we fail to act, we send a message that impunity is acceptable. But if we commit to justice, we reaffirm the dignity of the victims and ensure history doesn't repeat itself anywhere in the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rahman, for your courage and for sharing the story of loss through your brother's story, sharing other stories as well.
It's an honor.
And indeed, shaping a future where such violent acts are not tolerated again. We'll now open the floor to questions. Please hold your placard up. And for those of you who don't have a placard, please feel free to just put your hand up. I will ask you to please keep your interventions very brief. Unfortunately, we don't have much time. And we also want to save some time for the closing statements of all our speakers. So kindly introduce yourselves and indicate if your question is directed at anyone in particular. We can start over there, please. Sir.
With Forum Asia. The question is mainly for the High Commissioner. Our question relates to your recommendations to the Council. As a number of us civil society organizations have expressed in our engagements with your office, we had hoped the report will also make clear recommendations for the Council in supporting the implementation of the recommendations. At this critical juncture in Bangladesh, where the situation remains fragile and uncertain, we believe the Council could provide a stable and sustained framework for international engagement and play an important preventive role and support international monitoring investigations as well as domestic reform initiatives by the interim government. So what would be your recommendation for the Council? And finally, we also urge you to consider a follow-up initiative before the end of the year in the form of a dedicated intersessional briefing on the progress in the implementation of the recommendations of your office. We believe such a briefing could provide an opportunity for the Council members and civil society victims and survivors to assess how recommendations by your office have been implemented ahead of a sensitive time period as the country heads for potential elections which could take place at the end of this year or early next year. Thank you.
In sets of several sets at once, so we can get as many in as possible. The representative of Saudi Arabia, I believe.
For giving me the floor. Let me first start by thanking the government of Bangladesh for its constructive engagement. And I would like to ask, what are the measures the government of Bangladesh has taken for the treatment of the victims? Thank you.
Thank you very much to you, High Commissioner, and to your office for holding this event and for all the work that you've done on Bangladesh. We salute to the people of Bangladesh for everything that they have experienced and everything that you are now trying to do to address this difficult time in your history. But there are a lot of positive aspects, as we've just been discussing, arising out of what was undeniably a very tragic period. We're grateful to the High Commissioner in particular we agree with you that what you were able to do last summer was a good demonstration of the office's ability to act in an agile way and to be responsive. We're also very grateful, as you said at the start, for your emphasis on rigorous methodology. Our question would be, perhaps if you are able to at this point, either of you, to expand a little bit on the outlook for support from the Office of the High Commissioner and the way in which that feeds into what I think, as you've all been outlining, will be a long process of national healing going forward, which we're obviously also very keen to support. Thank you.
I'm 𝗵𝗵𝗃𝗂𝘁𝗂𝘁, working with the International IG. I have an observation to make, please. The violent atrocities against the minority in Bangladesh, in being termed as revenge violence. And I beg to state that the word revenge is wrong. And the violence perpetrated by mob against the minorities, including minority religious and leaders and human resources, to which activists was provoked. And also done to legitimize the control of interim group in power. That's all what I observed.
Thank you. My question is to Advisor Nuzrul. My name is 𝗧𝗲𝗃𝗂𝘁 from the Rights and Risk Analysis Group. Will the interim government of Bangladesh extend democracy to the Chittagong Hill tracts, where both the Hill District Council and the Regional Council never had elections from 1989? So, I mean, will the government of Bangladesh take measures to hold elections to ensure that people could exercise democracy in that region too?
I'm Sanjida Islam. Thank you for allowing me here in this session. And we are really grateful to have a fact-finding such report, which is helping us our July-August protest and uprising, where we have sacrificed 2,000 and more lives. But beside that, we represent 𝗲𝗵𝗃𝗂𝘁𝗃, which is a platform of victims of enforced disappearances, which happened last decade, 1.5 decade, during the 𝗥𝗶𝗴𝗵𝘁𝘀 Hasina's regime. And we work as a shelter to do the advocacy for those victims across the country. And we encourage and we request for full support of the United Nations and advocate for a robust mechanism for fact-finding regarding such enforced disappearances and those human rights violations also, so which will help us to bring the truth in front of us, where families like us, I'm Sanjida, my brother's name is 𝗪𝗲𝗻𝗄𝗏. We still not know whether my brother is alive or not, how the torture happened in the secret detention cells, how brutally they have given him the electric shocks, or they have thrown his dead bodies to the rivers or not. So those truths should come out. And for that one, I think we need a full support from the United Nations also to extensive support on those fact-finding, and also so that we firmly believe that apologizing for past actions is insufficient to restore justice. The path to healing involves uncovering the truth and ensuring those responsible for atrocities are held accountable. together we can work towards have just and human society. And, we thank the interim government to form an inquiry commission on enforced disappearances. And, recently they have identified and opened the secret detention cells where our chief advisor visited. So we want to restore those evidences, which is very crucial for us. And we want to emphasize the need for the military to acknowledge any involvement in these matters and strive for transparent communication in this. And also we call for accountability by ensuring that all state officials who have played a role in enforced disappearances are brought to justice. We support the establishment of swift and transparent trials that provide fair and exemplary consequences for those found guilty. Thank you.
We'll just call on this lady over here and then the representative of the Netherlands, and then we'll pass the floor to the panel for their responses.
Hello, everyone. I'm Noshin. I'm a law and policy student who was actively on streets during the July-August uprising. Meanwhile, my brother, who's 17-year-old, was shot, and it did not end there because when we tried to take him to hospitals for treatment, he was denied treatment from almost all the hospitals, and he had to stay with the bullet in his body for 4 days. After that, somehow we managed to extract the bullet. The violation of human rights did not stop there yet, because when we brought him back home, every night we were scared that police might arrest him, because at that particular time in Bangladesh, being a student was a crime. Every door-to-door law enforcement agencies were going and asking, do you have a student? And even he's injured, he or she was being arrested. So here I want to stress on the fact that some people might have survived the injury, like my brother, thankfully, but it's not always only about the physical injury. Coming from Bangladesh, a country where mental health support seeking is not always welcomed, rather than it is considered as a taboo most of the time, how do we deal with this generation of people who are mostly 18 to 25 years of age, that this entire generation is traumatized? Someone might not have gotten shot himself, but he saw his friend getting killed right in front of his eyes. So how do we deal with these people, these students, these victims? And I would urge the interim government, and also we need it because we are talking about an entire generation who are traumatized. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. The representative of the Netherlands, please.
Ravina, I will be very brief. Thanks for this opportunity to hear from the office about its work in Bangladesh, but especially also to hear some of the individual stories of those affected. I took the floor to express our deep appreciation for the willingness of Bangladesh to seek justice in its broadest sense for the violations committed. And we encourage the government to continue this path towards accountability. And we're very pleased to hear today that the domestic accountability measures will be used for the implementation of the recommendations contained in the report. I don't have a specific question, but I wanted to briefly praise OHHR for its quick action upon Bangladesh's invitation. And it's good to see that the newly established Human Rights Inquiries Branch has made this possible. It's an excellent example of a joint effort of the country concerned and the office towards accountability. And we hope this will set a good example to other governments in the same situation. Thank you.
We will have to leave the room at 2 p.m. sharp. So I'll just call on that gentleman all the way in the back, and then we'll pass the floor to the panel.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I speak on behalf of a consortium of anti-torture organizations. We are called the United Against Torture Consortium, which includes Redress, IRCT, the OMCT, Omega, and for us, the Association for the Prevention of Torture. So we have just returned from Dhaka for 2 weeks, focusing on finding out ways in which we can support local government bodies and local actors in sustainable systemic reforms, as many of the panelists have said today. So my question is more for the OHCHR and the law advisor in terms of the follow-up initiatives. To the OHCHR, we'd like to find out more about your next steps, and in particular, many of the stakeholders that we have spoken to locally in Dhaka would welcome the establishment of an 𝗏𝗃𝘁 office there to go forward for the implementations of the recommendations that you have come. And I think for the law advisor, I wonder for us in supporting our local partners for the next year in our project, whether you see the ability for major reforms in the security sector and in the criminal justice system prior to the hosting of elections, which I understand is your next priority. Thank you.
Sir, please, and then the High Commissioner.
There have been many questions. One particular question I'm interested to answer is somebody accused us of measures taken against the minority community. Let me clarify that there had been some incidents of political violence against the torturer, the hooligans of Aওয়ামী League regime who oppressed and tortured people for many years, killed people. So there had been some incidents, and because of those incidents, a number of people who were deeply involved with the Aওয়ামী League fascist regime, they were attacked. There had been some incidents like that. We strongly condemn that. But in most of the cases, those persons belong to Muslim community. Only a few of them belong to minority religions. So if you brand it as measures against minority community, I would beg to disagree. We have statistics, we have fact-checked information. If you like to talk after the incident, I'll show you. The second thing is there was one question about election in CHT. I should reaffirm that our government is committed to the voting right of every person in Bangladesh, be it at the CHT area, be it at any other places. And we have already formed a commission which will work on the local government issue. Third thing is I'm working with UNHCR, CHR. Of course, we are looking forward to that. We have already agreed a draft text, and I think we could go a long way to work together, and we are deeply grateful to OHCHR for that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. I mean, in terms of the Human Rights Council, first of all, I, as you know, in my global update referred specifically to the fact-finding report. I also referred to the situation in Bangladesh. It is a fact that the interim government, the interim authorities have fully cooperated with us on the establishment of the report. We have now a process in place that seeks to follow up on the recommendations. Indeed, we are very close to hopefully finalizing our presence in the country, which would precisely be to provide the support, the technical cooperation on all the areas, including on the issue of disappearances. I mean, of course, we bring in also the mechanisms in fact, the interim government has already taken the steps to sign the Convention on Enforced Disappearances. There's a whole follow-up foreseen, because I fully agree with you. One of the truth-telling is about the fate of the disappeared people, because that brings closure for the families and for the loved ones, and that's incredibly important. It is a part of this victim-centered approach. We will continue to find ways to keep the Human Rights Council informed. That's also a very specific request that Dr. Yunus has put to me, and we will make sure that this is important. Just on more broader issue, and I've said it in my press conference in Dhaka at the time, it's a huge chance for the country at this pivotal time to deal with its past, to overcome its past, to reach a moment of healing and truth-telling, and that includes each and everyone within the society of Bangladesh. And it includes religious, ethnic, whatever differences you may have, but it is one country. It is one citizenship. And that's really what I think is happening at the moment, also through the reform efforts, which I think all of us have to support, because it is meant from the perspective of anchoring human rights very much in the governance of the future of the country. And that's a unique opportunity for each and every citizen of Bangladesh, irrespective of, they belong to whatever group or community. And that's really, I think, one of the big hopes that we have on the human rights front. And I remember my first telephone conversation with Dr. Yunus very much for coming.
Thank you, High Commissioner. We end on that hopeful note. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all your questions, but please feel free to reach out to the office directly with any follow-ups. Thank you.
Selection.
No, there were.
প্রতিবাদ দিল্লির মসনদে বিজেপির প্রত্যাবর্তন নাকি আম আদমির টানাচার চলছে চুলচেরা বিশ্লেষণ বুথ ফেরত জরিপে গেরুয়া শিবির এগিয়ে থাকলেও হাড্ডাহাড্ডি লড়াইয়ের আভাস